Good evening. Welcome to Jorgensen Digital Stage for the final event for the Amplifying Black Voices in Hollywood series, our inaugural event for the digital perspectives in digital media, diverse perspectives in digital media and design speaker series. To paraphrase James Baldwin, nothing can be changed until it is faced. This is certainly true of the inequities that have historically shaped the entertainment industry, both on screen and behind the scenes. We are halfway through Black History Month, and today's summit appropriately featured conversations with Black leaders from various sectors of the film industry, and will examine its changing landscape by exploring efforts to increase diversity in all aspects of Hollywood, from screenwriting to development and production, producing and directing, and visual effects and post-production. The summit has been brought to you by UConn's Department of Digital Media and Design in partnership with Jorgensen Center for the Performing Arts and the H. Fred Simmons African American Cultural Center. We would like to begin this evening's event by acknowledging that the land on which we typically gather here in Storrs, Connecticut, is the territory of the Mohegan, Nantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Scottikie, Golden Hill Pegasset, Nipmuc, and Lenape peoples, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example. Tonight's event will feature an hour of conversation, including questions from the virtual audience. Please take advantage of the YouTube chat box to submit questions for our guest, which we will try to answer during the discussion. I'm Heather Elliott Familaro, and I'm a digital artist and documentary filmmaker, and most importantly, tonight, the department head for digital media and design at the University of Connecticut. DMD is a young department. We were founded just in 2013, but we've rapidly grown to have over 350 undergraduate and graduate students and 25 full-time faculty. We have 7 undergraduate concentrations across the full digital media spectrum: film production, animation, interactivity, business, and the humanities at both the Storrs and Stanford campuses. In our department, we value and celebrate our students' diverse backgrounds, and we support their development both as individuals and as professional media creators. This Diverse Perspectives in Digital Media and Design speaker series is one celebration of these shared values. So now on to the show. It is my extreme pleasure to welcome today's guest, Romany Malco, who is going to share his insight and experiences through fighting for equity in Hollywood, leveraging film as a conduit for change. Actor, writer, director, and producer Romany Malco redefines what it means to be a chameleon and multi-hyphenate with his diverse skill sets and wide-ranging talent in both comedy and drama. Malco wrote, produced, directed, and starred in the mockumentary film Tijuana Jackson, Purpose Over Prison, based on his web series of the same name, which premiered last month. The film centers on his alter ego, Tijuana Jackson, an ex-convict with dreams of becoming a self-made motivational speaker and life coach. Romany raised over $200,000 through a crowdfunding campaign to fund the film. Malco starred in the 2019 Netflix film Holiday Rush, where he plays a single dad who loses his job right as his 4 kids share their Christmas lists. On television, Malco currently stars as Rome in ABC's drama series A Million Little Things, alongside Ron Livingston, James Roday, and David Giuntoli. Malco was nominated for an NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Actor in a Drama Series for this role. Malco's breakout role was the trash-talking womanizer Jay in Judd Apatow's 2005 box office hit, The 40-Year-Old Virgin. Since then, he has appeared in several memorable roles alongside some of the biggest names in film, including Las Vegas alongside Robert De Niro, Morgan Freeman, and Michael Douglas. Box office hits like Think Like a Man and Think Like a Man 2, The Love Guru alongside Mike Myers, Blades of Glory with Will Ferrell and Will Arnett, and Baby Mama alongside Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. On television, Malco is known for his role on the critically acclaimed Showtime series Weeds, opposite Mary Louise Parker and Kevin Nealon. He has also a recurring role on the Starz sitcom Blunt Talk, opposite Sir Patrick Stewart. Additionally, television credits include the CBS drama The Good Wife, Amazon Star comedy Mad Dogs, and ABC comedy No Ordinary Family. So thanks so much for joining us tonight, Ron.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me. That was a great intro, Heather. And also just want to say thank you to Nikki as well, both of you, for having me and being patient with me. I'm really excited to be here.
We are
excited, and thank you to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to introduce the host of tonight's show and my colleague right here at UConn in the Digital Media and Design Department, Nikki Justice. Nikki is an independent producer and seasoned entertainment executive with a background in film production and distribution. She has produced multiple projects, including the Latino thriller Coyote Lake, starring Camila Mendez and Adriana Barraza, as well as the horror anthology Nightmare Cinema from acclaimed directors Joe Dante, David Slade, Mick Garris, Ryuhei Kitamura, and Alejandro Bruges. In 2017, she helped launch the distribution arm of Good Deed Entertainment by bringing in the Oscar-nominated Van Gogh biopic Loving Vincent. She went on to become the chief operating officer for the company, releasing over 30 films, including tonight's focus, Tijuana, Jackson Purpose Over Prison. Before leaving to join our digital media and design department, she continues to distribute films as the head of distribution for Buffalo 8, and her focus is on projects from diverse voices that are designed to transform viewer opinions, influence change, and reach underserved audiences. So Nikki, thanks so much for being here tonight. And I'm really, really excited to have this conversation. So let's get started. I'm gonna pass you over the virtual mic.
Thank you, Heather. So Rom, first and foremost, congratulations on your baby boy Brave. We are all so excited for you. There's no better feeling than and no more exciting but also terrifying feeling than holding that baby for the first time, and realizing you're responsible for that little human. How has it been juggling fatherhood, shooting a movie right now, and all of your entrepreneurial endeavors?
Well, I'll tell you this. I thought, I've been a stepdad. We don't really use the term, but I've been a stepdad for 6 years, and my 11-year-old is autistic. So I felt like he prepared me for everything, but I've never been responsible. When I met my oldest son, he was 5 years old, and I met my daughter, she was 11, but I've never been responsible for anything as delicate and as precious and as dependent as a newborn. And witnessing the whole process and everything just kind of gave me a whole different appreciation for mothers across the board. And it just made me want to be a better human being, just made me want to be more present and loving. And that's it. I'm excited and I'm exhausted. That's genuinely how I feel. I'm actually not filming a movie. I'm filming my show, A Million Little Things, for ABC. Oh, we're doing the 3rd season now, and I'm excited and about being a dad, seeing this little dude who sleeps just like me already. He sleeps just like me. I'm interested in seeing if, one of the things that I miss with my oldest son is, because of his condition, we bond. Like, there's no question about it that we're freaking frat, but I don't get to have exchanges with him like you would a typical kid. And I'm hoping that will be the case with Brave, so that I can really get a deeper understanding of who he is and what he likes and his opinions on things, and have him challenge me on things. And I'm excited about it, but I'm nervous as hell about it at the same time, because that's the one that's going to be mimicking me in areas that I don't even want to see in myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like you in particular have set the bar really high. I've been following your journey for a long time, and you have this selflessness about you, especially with your fans. And almost from the get-go, you've always found ways to empower the every man or every woman. And I absolutely love that. And I'm curious why, when you were starting your career, which is normally the moment when people are most selfish, what was it that made you want to do this? Why was this such an important thing for you as an entertainer?
That's first of all, it's the biggest compliment. One, the fact that you wanted me here today is a huge compliment. But to refer to me as selfless, I really appreciate that. But I think that just being raised in a Caribbean household, I think there's just a different thing about a different way to interpret community. And so I really come from the school of, if we all good, then we all good, and so any information that I get, nothing has ever been more rewarding than being able to pass on that information. Anything that I've put into practice that has worked for me is to pass on that information. So way before I came into the industry, that's just always who I was. Another part of it is that, you know, I experienced a lot of dysfunction growing up. I think that I had like developed major insecurities early in life. And I think that being an overcompensator and constantly being a people pleaser eventually became just part of my overall psychological makeup. And so that's part of being that people pleaser and taking care of everybody in the room, was passing on good information whenever I came across it. And then lastly, I just started discovering how, like, if you think from a long-term perspective, which all of us are not capable of doing, sometimes we're not capable of doing it because we just don't have the patience or don't want to. And sometimes it's something that we're genetically predisposed to. Perhaps we don't have as much, you know, gray matter, you know, merging the left and right hemisphere of the brain. So our ability to exercise foresight is not as enhanced as a typical person. And so um, I feel like I'm a long-term player, and I've gotten to witness, coming from the music industry, how being generous with information and being generous with opportunities has come back around and benefited me. And it's just been like, uh, it's just been the thing that I do. Um, yeah. And also, like, I come to Hollywood, man, and I don't really fit in with the fancy people. I'm gonna tell you the two people that I always mesh with when I'm in Hollywood. I mesh with the businessmen, the people who are managing the funds, raising the money for, if they're raising, if they are in charge of raising money for Lionsgate or managing a hedge fund or something like that. I mesh with those people, and I just mesh with like the everyday blue collar dude, and everything in between sometimes, particularly when it came to Hollywood, just seemed a little bit uncomfortable and unnatural for me. And so usually in the environments that I'm in, I'm either being empowered by someone or passing that game on to someone else, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked a little bit about your background in music. Can you tell us how you got to where you are in the industry now?
In the film industry, yeah. So I had done music for an animated cat that belonged to Paula Abdul and MC Scat Cat. And the way that I did that music was because when I was a rapper back in the day, I'm like a one-hit wonder. I had a friend named Andrew Stephanopoulos. I'm sure you know of his brother, George Stephanopoulos. Well, Andrew worked at Virgin Records when I was at Virgin Records. And so many years after my rap career was over, I got this random call from Andrew saying, hey, John Leguizamo really loves the way you write for this cat. He wants something you could rap like that, write like that for him for his movie, The Pest. Next thing you know, I'm in the studio with John Leguizamo recording stuff. And John's like, funny, hilarious, cool guy. I was a big fan. And when I say I was a big fan, let me explain, because it's not the typical, I was a big fan. Yeah, I'm a big fan. Oh, what's the last movie I did? I don't know. No, I was a big fan. Like, I would play Spikorama and Mambo Mouth in the background of all company. I keep it on low so we could play music. But then when people like were in the living room, I would make everybody get quiet and turn it up for them to hear something really funny that he was about to say, and then I'd turn it back down. Everybody was like, I was that type of John Leguizamo fan. And the fact that he came, and ended up working together was great. But his wife at the time was like, yo, you hang out with comedians and Rom is funny than all of them. You should get Rom. So he asked me to audition for his movie, which I did. I auditioned for the movie a few times. He wasn't there. He was off filming Romeo and Juliet, but they called me back like 6 times. And then they had a mix match session, which is where you kind of go off the cuff. I didn't have that kind of experience. I didn't get the job, but the casting agent, her name was Wendy Kurtzman. She called everybody in Hollywood that was looking for new talent for pilot season and told them that I was her favorite audition of all time. And the next thing, my phone, a year later, my phone was just ringing off the hook. And people calling me in to do stuff. And so I was like, nothing in my life has ever just shown up in my lap. So this obviously is an opportunity that I should seize. And then I just took it really seriously and used the business as a way to mature in areas where I think I would normally have fallen off. I should expound on that. I could just tell by the look on Nikki's face. She was like, and
Well,
yeah, no,
don't leave me with a cliffhanger.
no, you're right. I just mean, like, you know, we all face challenges in whatever our endeavors are. We hit these glass ceilings, and those glass ceilings are usually a reflection of your own limitations. And so usually whenever I would hit those glass ceilings, I just bounce on to the next thing. Because rather than endure those challenges and possibly end up not looking good or failing, I was, you know, if you're multi-talented, it's like a curse, because then you can just move on to the next thing and look good all over again. Wow, he just started doing this and he's so good at it, you know. And so I decided that with acting that I wasn't going to do that, and that I was going to stick it out and endure all the highs and all the lows and break past that glass ceiling. And it was acting is a great way to learn a lot about yourself, especially when you make up your mind to play characters without judgment. Uh-oh, I think Nikki just froze. That, you know why? That was the coldest line I've ever spit in an interview, and it froze her. I gotta not be so cold.
She's literally frozen on the other side. I'm sure she'll be hopping back in. But I know that one of the things, which is a nice segue, is she wanted to talk about the People's Empowerment Network. So
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, how you got that started, and tell us all about that?
Yeah, it's called the People's Empowerment Platform. And just basically, like, you know, I've been on social media for a long time. And I've, hell, I've I've consulted the White House for social media. I've had a successful crowdfunding campaign, and I've learned a lot about it. And I realized that, you know, there are a lot of companies, particularly the behemoths of social media, and what their intentions are is to ultimately eke as many advertising dollars out of its users and advertisers as possible. And I think that with all of the things that have occurred, from Cambridge Analytica, you know, all the data mining, to uh, all the political conflict, the manipulation of information when you do searches, and the constant onslaught of advertising. It's so much noise. I think that it's only natural that social media progress. And what I mean by that is, moving forward, particularly people who are small business owners or influencers or filmmakers like myself, or anyone trying to, you know, nurture a following or a community, it's important that you actually lead your platform you lead your followers to a place, and then direct them to which platforms uh, they should engage you on, rather than the traditional way. And the reason that I say that is because um, we've seen it multiple times. Businesses, particularly small businesses, vanish, or revenues just slashed to a tenth of what they were by something as simple as an algorithm change. But if you maintain the direct relationship with your audience, and then you dictate, hey, I'm going to be posting to Facebook. If you follow me on Facebook, here's something for you, so forth and so on. Then all of a sudden, it empowers you again, and makes it much more difficult to get between you and your audience. And if you don't know what the People's Empowerment Platform is, it's called Pet Pager Lite. It's an app you can download in Google Play in the App Store, and it's just basically a messenger app. So when you sign up for the app, and let's say I say follow me on it'll ask you when you sign up to follow me, do you follow Romney on Facebook, or do you follow Romney on YouTube, or do you follow Romney on Instagram? You just select and let them know. And so whenever I post something to Facebook that I think is of significance, I will be able to let all the people who follow me on Facebook know. And it will provide you with a clean link that'll take you directly to it. You won't have to scroll through all the noise. You don't have to worry about all the excessive data mining. It'll take you directly to my post. And when you're done with that post, you can come right back to the PEP and take the next message from your next influencer. And if you're a small business and you'd like to use it, please do. It's free. Help yourself. And anyway, so that was my motivation for it, was basically thinking that moving ahead, social media has to go in that way. And for those of us who don't see it that way, who think that the traditional way is the route to go in the future, I say you're a glutton for punishment. You're a glutton for punishment. Yeah. Sorry.
So speaking about motivation, how did Tijuana Jackson come to be?
It's one of those things, Nikki, what you were talking about in the very beginning, which is that, you know, keeping it 100, I just like the idea of like helping folks. And I've always had this knack of taking something that seems foreign and breaking it down in the simplest of terms. Like I can explain the way the liver functions or the gallbladder functions, but in the most hood way. I've always been that dude, right? People look to me, they called me Rom nerd in school because they'll, even to this day, my friends say Rom is like hood proper. And so I just have this way of being able to communicate things that sometimes seem, you know, complex, but communicate them in a way that's very basic. And so back in 99, 2000, I just had seen some documentaries and it inspired this character. And I started recording myself on camera and soon realized that this like character would be hilarious if he were a life coach. Because one of the things I love about life coaches is that quite often they are preaching what they most need to put into practice. They preach what they most need to learn. They're often the irony is that it's like with TJ, as you can see, he's the most institutionalized person telling you how to liberate yourself. That to me, irony to me makes comedy, you know, it makes it caviar. And so I started using it as a means to like kind of explain things to an audience that would never go to a yoga retreat, that would never go to you know, psychotherapy, that would never consider going to you know, a workshop on personal development. I was like, oh, I'm gonna just bring it to you. And the thing is that it's not that it was exclusive to any particular demographic. I grew up in trailer parks and the projects, but I also grew up in you know, a lower class blue collar suburban neighborhood in Baytown, Texas as well. Suburb neighborhood in Baytown, Texas as well. And like, I just relate to people. You know what I'm saying? I relate to people who are poor. I understand what the struggles are, what the challenges are, how difficult it is to get motivated. And I wanted to find a way to bring all of these tools to that demographic, economic demographic. And like, TJ was my conduit. And a lot of times the kids that I was talking to wouldn't want to hear it from me because I'm corny to them. You know what I mean? So this character became like the version of me that they would like to listen to, and using, you know, of course, using humor and references that you can only use if you've been exposed to the life. Just made it like clockwork. It was just like it just took off. Like within 2 episodes online, I was getting calls from the New York Times and everything else. Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
As Heather had mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to actually work with you on the release of TJ. And
Thank you.
the weekly calls with you were my absolute favorite. Not only the energy that you would bring, but I mean, we'd be discussing distribution, marketing, publicity, and you would have so many ideas for every single one of those things, so many different ideas on how to market the film, on how to monetize it on all of these various platforms. And it's really become a case study that I show my students in class of what you need to be as a filmmaker in order to survive in the indie space. Is you have to have this really entrepreneurial mindset. So can you just speak a little bit further to some of those initiatives that you were able to implement for Tijuana Jackson?
No, absolutely. The first thing I want to say is that this also ties back to this whole concept of having a long-term mindset. So I understand that I come from an industry and I've been doing the types of films that have like a 2-week window in the box office. And if they don't do well, they kind of fall off into nothingness. And I've always been much more interested in the route of the indie filmmaker who's able to do, particularly with all the technology, a digital release and walk your film through all of the tiers, but thinking from a long-term perspective. And this is one of the reasons that I start this film. I start this answering this question with this right here. If you have not listened or watched Mark Duplass's keynote speech at the 2015 South by Southwest Film Festival, do so. Mark it down. It's Mark Duplass. He's talking to this huge audience about filmmaking. I ain't never heard nobody keep it as real as that brother. He is pretty much, he told my story legit, and then many stories of many independent filmmakers. That's the first thing I'll tell you. The other thing is I was always looking at it from a long-term perspective. So we have options. One option is we give up 70%, 70% of our film for the opportunity to be in theaters, and the distributor takes the lion's share. You get a smaller amount. You're already at a disadvantage simply because of the fact that you don't have immediate access to the data. So as advanced as Amazon and iTunes and all these platforms are, they don't provide you with a portal so that you can gauge what advertisement is and isn't working. So you're at a loss there. And so I was already planning to do a digital release of the film because up until this point, everything had been like, oh, wow, I guess I got to do that on my own too. I got to write it on my own too. Oh, damn. Oh, I got to cast it on my own too. Oh, shit. Wait, we can't get a director. Seriously? I got to direct it. Okay, I got to direct it on my own. And before you know it, I was editing the film, And so that, through that process of making the film, I just automatically assumed that distribution would probably do the same thing. But then you guys came on with the utmost enthusiasm, which I was excited for. And but I was still not willing to make the theatrical deal of giving up the lion's share of my film. And luckily I didn't, because what ended up happening was COVID-19 struck and the theaters weren't really much of an option anyway. And then the other thing is that you have to understand that as enthusiastic as people can be, and this is just me keeping it 100, people can be, when you're looking at a little indie company, that distributor that specializes in finding really crafty ways to get your movie distributed to indie theaters across the country, and then you take that away from them, they're figuring out, they're suddenly figuring it out just like you. And so and they don't have the budget to do all this extra savvy marketing. And so for me, I wasn't discouraged by it, because what I realized was I'm looking at this from a long-term perspective. And let me explain what I mean by long-term perspective. I bought an index fund for X amount. I invested a certain amount of money in an index fund in 2004. And then I automated a certain amount of money to go to that index fund every month for how many every years. Literally forgot about it until maybe like a month ago, when I saw how much money was in that account. I think the words that came out of my mouth, and I'm not a religious person, was hallelujah, praise the Lord, or something like that. And so my point being is that that's how I look at film, and that's how I encourage people to look at their projects. It's that, one, too many of us are going after film. If I'm too long-winded, cut me off. And if I'm moving away from the question, just steer me back on track. Okay, but too many of us look at film in the way in which Hollywood has conditioned us to look at film, as if we have to make it big and it has to hit, and if it doesn't hit, it's a failure. No, that's not really the way it works, at least not in my world. And the way that I look at it is, I put together this project and I look at it as though it is an index fund. And so when I put together this project, in my mind, the way that it's going to work is, I'm going to take my time, put it out there. We'll do some sort of launch, not just one. I'll do multiple launches over the course of the next 4 or 5 years. But I will, as I introduce it to new markets, but I will also come up with other crafty ways to continue bringing it up on a micro level without necessarily spending tons of money, to help encourage word of mouth. But I was also always looking at this project as, it's not just about selling the film. It's also about selling the concept. It's also about selling things around the film. So for instance, one of the things that's been most successful since the film is, I realized that I can't sit back, not see any data on on the platform that the film is available, and be content with the split that we have, and just hope that my advertising dollars are doing well. So what I did was I set up a Patreon account. So where the same character in the movie teaches has a digital online course that he teaches on Patreon. And so the beautiful thing is, now I'm spending money on Facebook advertising. It's driving great traffic to the site. and people, I've set up all these pixels so I can see that people are actually clicking through. So I have a pixel that says, you want to watch it on Stars, click here. You want to watch it on Amazon, click here. You want to watch it on iTunes, click here. So I'm able to see how many people are clicking through those things. And I don't know if this is illegal. I probably shouldn't say this. And I also set up affiliate accounts with all of those links. You know what I mean?
I
That might
love
be illegal.
that.
That might be illegal. I don't know. And then aside from, having my own cut of the movie through its distribution, but I also make sure that that page where I'm bringing people to see what platforms they can watch it on, I also promote TJ's courses, and that those courses, people find those videos so, like, I don't know, they can't get enough of them. And so that's actually proven really successful. So I look at all of these as streams of revenue for Tijuana Jackson, Purpose of a Prison. But the goal is to constantly and continuously bait people into watching the movie. And when I say bait, just basically promote and lead people into and encourage people to lead it. And hopefully word of mouth begins to spread. What I've noticed, just speaking in just this little experiment that we've been doing so far, is that we've noticed that the revenue of the last quarterly thing that we received, the revenue is now, we had the big blow up when it first came out, and then like any business, it petered out, and we're noticing that there's this really gradual climb in the revenue month to month moving forward. So the goal is to get that gradual climb that's kind of going like this right now, to eventually over the course of time to maybe see it go like this. And the reason that I'm bringing that up is because I'm looking at it like one of my index funds, compounded interest. But if you take the word interest and not look at it from the perspective of money, but look at it from the perspective of like a human's interest in something, you can compound interest through word of mouth if you have a good product and you truthfully believe in it. And it's just a matter of constantly making that product available and coming up with creative ways to introduce it to people. And I'm trying, believe me, that was my short answer.
No, it's so smart though. You have to treat it like a business. And I love that you're looking at the demographics and the purchasing behaviors of your audience, and you're adjusting your marketing strategy to reach them. And that was one of the things that I really loved in our initial conversations, because it is for many studios in Hollywood, when you get a film that's made by a Black filmmaker that stars Black actors, everyone's like, great, first audience, urban audience, and that is the focus. And so it was really so great and refreshing when you came in and started actually giving us intel on the demographic insights for Instagram. And you're like, actually, no, it's a lot of white women over 35 who love me.
It is, yeah. In fact, I love it. I'm looking at my Tijuana Jackson Discord right this second as we're talking, and someone just contributed $100 to Tijuana Jackson while we're talking. This is exactly what we're talking about. Someone named Big Noise. He goes, "Okay, I just sent $100, and to be a supporter on Tijuana Jackson Discord." And so the Discord is connected to the Tijuana Jackson Patreon. And so to me, I'm looking at it like, and to piggyback off of what you just said, Nikki, I'm looking at it as building an empire. So it could either be that I'm making a series of different films, but here's my perspective on this, and this is what I've witnessed in music, and I've witnessed it in film, which is that I'm only going to go tack onto this now. I've been offered jobs to write and direct for studio films. I've been offered jobs to write and direct for independent films because of this project, and that's great. My goal now was to probably go back, create a Tijuana Jackson TV show that would live on a streaming service and this is whether or not, when I say streaming service, it ain't gotta be Netflix. I love the concept of the big little giant. I love the concept of being direct to consumer, as long as the infrastructure is built for it. I'm not going to sit there and watch my shop all day. I'm not that dude. You know what I mean? But I'm willing to create a system that enables me to create and then feed my content to that system, and it constantly circulate throughout the audience that we built for ourselves. And so I'm looking to potentially create another show, create a show around Tijuana Jackson, create a movie around Tijuana, another movie around Tijuana Jackson, build Tijuana Jackson's Patreon over the next 5 to 10 years, with digital courses, because it seems to be something that people are really into. And ultimately, I believe that the studio already asked me if I'd like to make a sequel to this movie and that they would like to get involved. Let's just say that I were to make a film with the studio, it would automatically, even if it were a flop, get 100 times more attention than my little indie Tijuana Jackson movie did, but it would blow up the Tijuana Jackson catalog. And so the way that I look at it is I position things so that in the event that my catalog becomes of interest to a huge group of people, that all the opportunities for monetization are already in place. And I was the same way in music. And so I urge any filmmaker out there, when I was in music, when I first started in music, my A&R director at Virgin Records, she and I would actually go and hang out at places like Whiskey A Go-Go and whatnot, look at bands that were young, talk about whether we thought they were dope, and then they would bring them under their wing, and they would give them, like, I forgot what it was, a certain type of deal where you'd polish the group for a few years and then you'd help put them out. But then after a while, particularly I remember with hip hop, that changed. They kind of got rid of that department, and it was all about, okay, looking through Billboard magazine. Okay, I don't know who this artist is, but they're getting 127 spins a month in San Francisco and the Bay Area, Oakland. We need to go get that group. And they would sign you based on what you were able to achieve yourself. So they were now signing more self-contained entities that were able to promote themselves, market themselves, advertise themselves, create their own, produce themselves, create their own content. And so the same thing, film's behind music by about 15 years, and same thing's happening in film. It's really important that you are able to do all of these things. And I understand that it feels almost impossible, but let me just make this really clear. Social media is kind of bullshit. And so there are good things that happen, but when you really look at it, you're looking at a person who has millions of people following me across multiple platforms. And when it came down to who contributed to the Tijuana Jackson movie for my crowdfunding campaign, if we really want to do the numbers, 1,911 people. Now, to me, that's an incredible number for a number of reasons. One, when I post to Facebook, Facebook only allows like 1.6% of my following to see my posts unless I pay. Back then, Facebook maybe allowed like 6% of my following to see my post. Instagram, maybe a little bit more. Twitter, practically muted. And when you do the numbers, you're usually about 39 to 40% of the people that are following you on your platforms are following you on other platforms. So the beautiful thing about that is sometimes they're not seeing it on one platform, but they're seeing it on the other. But when you really break it down, a very small percentage of people are actually seeing what I'm posting or promoting. Yet, of that small percentage, 1,911 of them, I got the numbers. I broke the numbers down in a blog on my lifemanagementtribe.com if you're interested in seeing it. But it really explains it. And through those 1,911 people, I was able to raise like a couple $100,000, which to me is a big deal. I never looked at my crowdfunding campaign as the end all tell all. I looked at the crowdfunding campaign as a means of enticing investors. So what I've learned is that when you really want, when you seem like no one's interested, you really have to, sometimes you just gotta start to put on some music, hang up the decorations, start the party. Pour yourself a drink, crank up the music, get your ass on the dance floor by yourself. And when in Hollywood, when people see the party is started, then they want to come. Send out the invitations after you've already started the party. And that was one of the most effective things I could have done, because everybody talks about making a project, but when they see the train rolling, whoa, you casting this shit? When that happens, the game changes. And like within, I'm not going to say any big names, but I'm just going to say that within 3 days of shooting, we were getting calls from people we didn't even know knew that the project existed. So that's it. I started the crowdfunding campaign, used it and I only asked for 50% of what I thought I needed to make the movie. And I used the crowdfunding campaign. There's a number of reasons for that, to attract investors. It did. It showed the investors like, wow, this dude's really serious. Yes, I'm really serious. And as my crowdfunding campaign started getting to the point of actually hitting its mark, that's when all my celebrity friends were like, oh shit, this is serious. And then they all started pitching in money as well. So anyway,
Yeah.
I could go on forever. I don't know if I'm even
So
on.
no, so smart and really helpful for the students because we are a very young film department and we're trying to teach them the future of film and to be able to identify these trends and look for these trends. And so that's exactly what you're doing. So it's really helpful. As far as Tijuana Jackson, and I'm a firm believer that genre films in particular, whether it's horror or comedy, they can sometimes start conversations in ways that dramas or nonfiction narratives can't. Like you think about a film like Get Out and the conversations that we were able to have as a result of that. And I think TJ is very similar, where you were able to weave in some really complex themes and really important messages into comedy. And you've used comedy throughout your career. So why do you feel that comedy is such a strong conduit for change?
Well, I'm up there in age. I'm 52 years old, and so I was blessed to be raised in an era where film didn't really distinguish uh, drama from comedy. Like you'd watch a film, you'd laugh your ass off and cry at the same time, and that was the norm back then. Um, uh, Also, the radio didn't really distinguish. Okay, well, this is black music, and this is Billy Joel and Kool and the Gang came on back to back. So lucky to have had my taste in art be influenced in that way. And so I never really saw the need to differentiate. Also, like I said, growing up in a lot of dysfunction, one of the survival mechanisms you come up with is you find ways to make light of the most traumatic things. And so that's kind of what I always, once I got into film, it was the thing that I always wanted to bring to it, was finding ways I find comedy most funny when people are most committed, right? I think it's easy to play comedy with a wink and say, I'm not really this character, but isn't this funny? It's not as funny to me as a dude who's playing it and you don't know if he's serious or not. I like that shit. And one of the things that people struggle with me is they can't tell if I'm joking or serious. And I'm like, both. Yeah.
I love
And
that.
so because of that, but because I've learned that, I think that comedy is a great way to disarm people. Hell, look, the woman who had my child, that's what I did. I made her laugh until she was pregnant. You get things done with comedy. You break down barriers with comedy, music. These are things that are universal, and they tell you, they give you a lot of insight to an individual. And so I've always thought that from day one creating Tijuana Jackson, that if comedy is going to be the Trojan horse, let it be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you've talked about using film in particular as a medium for artistic and artistic expression, artistic empowerment, particularly for people of color.
Mhm.
Can you speak to that a little bit further, and especially with your experience with Tijuana Jackson and
Oh yeah,
films?
yeah, yeah. My situation's unique, right? So first of all, like I couldn't get hired by Black Hollywood when I first came into film. All I started doing things like Paul Rudd and I played brothers in an independent film titled The Chateau. I did another film with Vince Vaughn called The Prime Gig. Vince Vaughn, Ed Harris, um, and then I think and then eventually I ended up doing 40-Year-Old Virgin with Judd Apatow, and like I auditioned for all the black roles, I just couldn't get them. Even when they said I had gotten them, I still didn't get them. And so I'd gotten comments that alluded to the fact that I wasn't the type of black or black enough. So, you know, I ended up booking most of my roles in the beginning, like 90% of my roles weren't even written for African Americans. And it was James Lopez. He's the president of Will Packer Productions. He was the first brother to like call me in and be like, that dude right there should play Zeke. And I was like, isn't Zeke the player though? And he was like, yep. I was like, so Michael Ealy's not doing the film anymore? Did Michael Ealy decide that he's not doing it? Oh, he's gonna play another role other than the player? I was like, is there like a player in it? And they were like, no, 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 you got this, man. Trust me. And he was the first dude to like really allow me to be in a Black film that turned out to be a classic. And then since then, it's been a lot easier. And so I have a different perspective. And my perspective is that I think that I'm gonna probably get in trouble for this, but this is really something that I've been playing with Tijuana Jackson, and not playing with, but something that I think that it's important for us to understand that when you speak of a Black community, we have to understand that within the collective, there are microcosms. You know, there's people that are out there that are upwardly mobile and all about academia and or extremely or politically driven or extremely artistic. And then there's people out there that just, you know, downwardly mobile and like at a really, really like snowball pace. There's people out there who are extremely passive, apolitical, whatever the case is. My point just basically being is that we have to allow each group to do their thing so that they can lead us in the areas that they have strengths. And the fear that I have is that, you know, people want to create content for us, but they want to paint a picture of us that isn't necessarily authentic to all the different microcosms that exist. And so it's one of the reasons you'll never hear me really putting down another Black producer or Black director or writer for what they do, is because I understand that each piece is a part of the equation that is very necessary. In the same way that there are all these negative depictions of Black people when you look back in film. First of all, remember, Hollywood was rather complicit. In fact, like heading the frontier in that campaign to misrepresent Black people. Let's clarify that, right? Played a huge role in it. The second part of it is that it just I can't think of anything in the United States of America that was built by corporations or Caucasians was built with the intention of creating an avenue for unadulterated Black voices. I don't think that ever happened. And then the next thing is, you know, I'm talking about earlier on. It's happening now. And then the next thing is that it's important that we understand that just in the way we create these negative things, if we try to like homogenize the Black experience, just, you know, what ends up happening is we end up doing the same thing to our own people. And what I mean by that is we end up giving them perhaps one perspective that doesn't necessarily fit the perspective of the viewer. And the goal, in my personal opinion, now that we're all aware of what cultivation theory is and we're aware of how media influences our behavior and our outlook, is that we do allow our community to have you know, a diverse representation within the collective. And so for me, I really just relate to the blue collar dude. Like I'm not the scholar. I'm not the brightest cat, you know, knife in the drawer. And so I relate to that blue collar lifestyle. My dad worked construction for most of my life. My homies, you know, were mechanics, and you know what I mean, and worked at restaurants and whatnot. That's who I relate to. That's just what it is. And you know, and so I tend to do really well at depicting that life. And it may be one of the reasons that when I'm looking at people, one of the things I take to with the Coen brothers is I feel like they have a really good way of representing that aspect of America. So that's my thing. But that doesn't mean that if, you know, like my homegirl, Amanda Seals, she comes out and she's got this really profound depiction of talented Black, funny people, smart Black and funny people, and you know, they are representing a different spectrum of Black America. We need that too. We need that too. Nobody was trying to mess with Amanda Seales. Nobody was trying to mess with her because, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, because they didn't know how to get a read on this girl who was incredibly, who just straight out brilliant, right? But could, could recite Shakespeare but at the same time could flip it and like recite the dopest hip hop cuts. You know what I'm saying? Like no one knew what to do with that. She's so diverse. And so she had to carve her own lane. And in my personal opinion, it shouldn't be that difficult for her to do that. But now look at her, they can't get enough of her. You know what I'm saying? And so all of that to just basically make the point that I think that we have to be a bit more tolerant of the diversity within our collective. And as filmmakers, it's important to do that. Otherwise, we may end up doing just as much harm to our community as Hollywood did.
Well, I mean, how do you feel that Hollywood has changed for the better in your career, in your lifetime, in regards to that representation and having a more inclusive look at the nuances in cultures? I mean, have you seen progress in that, or how much more work would you still need to do?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's a whole lot of progress needs to be done. Look, man, I understand something. I understand that money talks in the United States of America. It's nothing. Very, 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 very few things in America are done just straight out of goodwill, particularly when you're dealing with major corporations. And the Black dollar now has some say. And since the killing of George Floyd, we've amassed, there's been this unification of allies looking to consciously spend their money and help support Black entities, Black business, Black artists. And, some platforms are taking heed to that and being like, shit, we got to do what we got to do. But I don't look at it as love. I look at it as business. That's what it is. Now, from my personal experience, I feel as though Netflix was really quick to draw a line in the sand and be like, yo, we really trying to help represent. In fact, I got a call from an executive producer at Netflix telling me that thought he was so proud of himself because he was working on all of these projects that starred or had African-American directors, African-American producers, no African directors, actors, or producers. But he was like, but when he really looked at it, he was like, damn, I realized that it isn't African-Americans that are bringing me these projects. And he was like, I need to do better, and I need you to help me do better. Can you please help me do better? Because he's my boy. So me and him have that rapport. That's love. Like that to me, and so I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, first of all, I'm not as informed. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, Hollywood's making these big changes. I'm not going to make these general statements. It really starts on an individual basis. And that's the type of call that I can speak on. Right. And Mike, the show that I'm on, A Million Little Things, my showrunner, DJ Nash, I have another showrunner on that show. Her name's Nina Cadero. She was like, listen, we have a problem. I was like, what's the problem? She goes, we don't have any first season, second season she came on. She's like, we don't have any Black writers in the room. And I think that your characters are just kind of, I don't know, they're being misrepresented. I was like, personally guilty of knowing one of the reasons I don't even do network television is because of that. And now I wasn't the one to say this needs to be addressed. My co-star was, and my showrunner was. And then they went balls to the wall in doing everything that they could to incorporate more women of color and more people of color and more women into the writing room. And it has paid off incredibly. He's made really conscious efforts to discuss issues that are important to the Black community, and allowing these people of color within the room to lead the charge on those things. So those are things that I'm personally experiencing. But there's a much bigger issue that also needs to be addressed. And and I don't think that I'm qualified enough to speak on it, but I will just say that it's these individual decisions, these individual choices that are actually going to make the bigger difference in the long term. And once again, I'm a long-term thinker. So if we continue in this direction, perhaps over the next 40 years, Hollywood could be a completely different thing. But for right now, I just know that when I watch movies, even like movies that I love, when I look back at them, I'm like, oh, wow. So when the bad kids came around, they had to be the brown kids. Interesting. Like, it stands out now. And Hollywood played a huge role in that. Media played a huge role in that. I ain't letting them off the hook ever.
It's really exciting because, this conversation we're having is we're kind of bringing back so much about what we talked about earlier, because we were talking with Alana Mayo, and we're talking about listening, right? And what this is so connecting with me is that, listening, having these conversations, being willing to mentor, being willing to talk about the things maybe that weren't talked about before, and how that's a starting point maybe.
Yeah, you know what? 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have been like, yep. Today, I'm like, nah, just put your money, spend money. I've learned I don't debate politics no more. I just put my money where my politics are. Simple as that. If I believe in a product, if I believe in a project, I just put my money there. There's nothing to discuss anymore. We already know what it is. The world over the last 4 years, the last how many of the years you want to say, America has shown its ass. We know who's who now. There's no more hiding and pretending. And so with that being said, I don't need you to come and I don't need you to be cool with me. I got my family, I got my people. I know what it is. You want to show love, you want to show support, put your money behind the business, put your money into the artistry, put your money into the movement, put your money into the campaigns, put your money, send that money, put that monthly donation to the Working Families Party. Send the money to the campaigns that you want to see excel. Shut up. Unless you got something positive to say, ain't nothing to debate. People have chosen a side, and there's nothing you can do to change that. So if you want to see some change, hey, that's how you do it. That's how you do it in this America. I'm starting to sound like the Tijuana Jackson course now, but it is what it is. That's my perspective. I ain't got shit to talk about really. I'm here to support the things that I believe in with my money.
Yeah, and if everybody would do that, we would be in a much different place. It's incredible.
I agree. And it needs to be done. It needs to be said. So.
Thank you.
And so, like at this point in the United States of America, particularly what we're talking about, if people don't know, it's because they don't want to know. It's not your job to educate people, and you're not educating them because people don't look for information. People look for affirmation. So what you want now is, I want the line in the sand, and the line in the sand to me is where you put your dollars. The line in the sand is to where you contribute your time. That's the line. That lets me know what you've chosen a side at that point. You get what I'm saying? And if you ain't doing that, there's nothing to discuss. I'm not really trying to feel you out. I ain't got time for that. I don't think a lot of people do.
No. We've seen that from this, and it's interesting with the pandemic and the way everything's been turned upside down. It's becoming more and more evident everywhere.
I'm gonna tell you, like, I could, man. Let me tell you something. I don't want to get too carried away, but one of the things that I do in the Tijuana Jackson course is I speak heavily. We have like a thing, and we talk about investments, and I will tell you, there's ways to make money off of racists. And when I say that, it's like you exploit their ignorance. And I'm not telling you to make unethical business investments, but I'm talking about watching the way in which people react to certain things emotionally can help you dictate where to invest your money. And you know what? Keep being racist, keep being emotional. We know what to do with the dollars. Don't worry. And so and the reason I'm bringing that point up is that we need to really start removing our emotions from the equation and understand that what we're in. Being raised in a West Indian family and having to go to school in Trinidad and the United States and live back and forth, I didn't leave the Trinidad for good until I was 13. But having to go back and forth like that, I was blessed with the opportunity to see the United States from the outside in rather than from the inside out. And it's a very different orientation, particularly when it comes to entertainment in the United States of America, than if you're someone who's coming from outside. And that'd be one of the reasons. There's great articles on this that you can look up. I actually speak about this in the TJ stuff too, which is that, there's a reason that minorities have like a 67% higher chance of succeeding in the United States of America than people born and raised in the United States of America. And part of it is the indoctrination. They don't enjoy that indoctrination. Another thing is that they do is they believe in community. So they rely heavily on community. Another thing that they do is they value education differently. Another thing that they do is that they don't sit in front of televisions and absorb this these false teachings for 7 hours a day. And so their orientation into this country is just different, and it makes them more apt to endure the challenges of actually achieving great things. And then I heard someone mention the other day, there's a visa here in the United States of America for people who are really smart and really talented. There's like a visa that we have here to allow the geniuses in. You know what I'm saying? And then when you look at like 39% of the major tech companies built, whether, throughout Silicon Valley in the last, how many ever years, 39% of them are made by immigrants. It's like, so all of that to basically make the point that is that we, as people here in the United States of America, we have to wean ourselves off of whether we want to accept it or not. A lot of us look to entertainment as our higher education without knowing it. So what that means is if you're sitting in front of a television in theta state, in this state that's really meant for healing, you're actually sitting there in this state for healing, and you're being taken advantage of because you're downloading all of this information. For instance, you're watching a program, and in the program you see your favorite sitcom or whatever, and family comes downstairs and they're all sitting around at breakfast eating cereal, right? So now you subconsciously have now been programmed to equate eating cereal with a happy family. And so it's something you aspire to now. Problem is that eating this friggin' cereal in the morning, that particular cereal out the damn box, you ain't doing nothing but setting your children up for fatty liver in like the next 15 years. You wonder why they can't get rid of the midsection. That might be part of it. And so we have to like start becoming a bit more savvy and selective in our content, which I believe that we are. And we have to start being more conscious of what we actually consider content, because whether we know it or not, whether we want to accept it or not, there are people who are going to take these moments and want to hold on to it 15, 20 years from now. It's that nostalgia that they got from watching this classical film or a film that you may have made or a show that you may have put together, and it will have influenced how they conduct their lives moving forward. So you do have a responsibility as the filmmaker to be mindful of that.
That's such a good point. And I love that you're bringing up immigrant voices, because it's another kind of diversity in storytelling, and that needs to be seen, whether it's, in Hollywood or independent film or on television or the internet. And, it's really, really important. Nikki, you're back.
Yeah.
Are you there? I thought you were wanting to say you're in and out, but
I know. I'm now on my phone. I'm using my data instead of the Wi-Fi. This snowstorm has taken out all the internet in my area, so it's all good. I came back for the tail end. Rom, this was so inspirational, as always. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, the students were all really excited to hear from you, and like I said, you are a trailblazer, and I'm thrilled that they are able to learn from you and from your experiences.
Thank you so much. Listen, I got to tell you, when we got that quarterly statement and I saw that after the big boom, I was like, oh shit, our income is on an incline. So it's a small incline, but we're not doing anything. It's getting there. And like, you can just look at, like, if you just go to Amazon and look up indie films made for $350,000, $400,000, ain't none of them got as many reviews as our film. Our film's like, no, it's bananas. And that's just Amazon. So I'm very excited. And I do feel like being a trailblazer, you have to have, if you're going to be a trailblazer, you have to have a long-term vision. I would just suggest, once again, before we sign out, please check out Mark Duplass's keynote speech at the 2015 South by Southwest Film Festival. And and just kind of, in my opinion, I want you to take marketing just as serious, conventional marketing as well, just as serious as your filmmaking, because it is just, like I say, it's important that you become self-contained and get off of this illusion that you need to, that social media is going to give you access to tons of people. It's bullshit.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's billions of people on Facebook, but you want to reach them, you have to pay for them.
Absolutely.
And the whole point of being an independent filmmaker is not to have to pay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but even
yeah.
I mean, even but beyond marketing too, you've been able to understand where your audiences live and how they interact with each of these platforms, and which part of the TJ story is best suited for that specific platform.
100%.
And that, like, transmedia storytelling, in my opinion, is absolutely the future. And like I said, you're the perfect case study for someone who really understands that and has been able to execute it in a very impressive way.
Nikki, thank you. And I hope that we get to work together again in the near future.
I would love that.
I'm really honored that you would even have me. Heather, you've been an excellent host as well. I am extremely grateful, and hopefully we get to do this again sometime.
I would love to do this. And, you know, I just am so inspired, and I'm really thinking about, you brought up so many important things. You know, we was really new. Our film program just started last fall. And like, since we began it, I've been talking about like, what are we going to create? Because, you know, there's already a gazillion film schools out there that have been doing it the Hollywood way. Like we are, I say, the unburdened by the cement shoes of the traditional film industry. And so just having this conversation around with you is just blow my mind to really think about, like, what do we want to create as this young group, and how are we going to empower these students to get that content out, to get these new voices heard, different stories heard, and get it delivered in different ways. So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I just want to say, one of the things you'd better be creating is a catalog. And I'm telling you, it's like, you know, we tend to make film and want the immediate gratification of the film blowing up, because that's kind of what we've been conditioned to. No, you're making a catalog. Each project is going to make you better. You'll eventually be acknowledged, and you'll eventually have your opportunity to create the projects, similar projects or even bigger projects on a much larger scale, because your work will have eventually gotten you some acknowledgement in areas. Once you show, pulling together a film is a difficult thing. It takes a rare breed to be able to do that. And if you're able to show you're able to put together quality content consistently, there are people who are going to want to work with you, myself included. And so you continue to create remember, you create your catalog, but you don't just create your catalog. You make sure that you set up your catalog in a way to where that it's always readily available to be monetized, so that when you get the opportunity to make that film, or that film that you know that or you do make this critically acclaimed film, that it blows your catalog up, and your catalog's already set up to go. And when I say catalog, I'm not just talking about what you've made in the past. Your catalog, as in films you'd like to work on in the future.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you should have those decks prepared and all this other stuff, as well as the films that you've been making. Talk is cheap in this era. There's no excuse for anyone. You're either making film or you're not. And if you're sitting around waiting to pitch and get a budget, you're bullshitting yourself, because you're just really afraid to deal with the challenges of having to come to grips with making it on your own, and maybe you not being as excited or proud about the end product. But to me, that's part of the journey of getting to the point of being proud of the end product.
And the hard work ahead.
Yeah. And the hard work ahead, the journey. You know what I'm saying? Build that. You want to make something? Go. I'm telling you, all the students listening, go build a catalog. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
That's the best advice. Yeah. Nikki, any last words? And then I'll close us out with some announcements.
We have already, Ram stayed well over his 1 hour, so I'll let you close out. And thank you so much. I love that your brain is working at this capacity on a few hours of sleep with a newborn. So that just gives everyone a glimpse at what you are capable of.
Okay, you know what? And I got to confess something. I was in this office until 5 o'clock this morning, because there's a 12-part series that I'm doing on Patreon right now for Tijuana Jackson for the course, and the edit came back, and I was like, oh my God, this doesn't articulate my point well enough. So I recorded, shot, and edited another version, an additional version to mesh with the film. To mesh with that video, so that I could upload it on time to Patreon. And I had to make a video 5 o'clock this morning, making a video to my Patreon followers in full character, explaining why the video isn't up on Thursday as usual, and that it would be up today. And so now
Oh,
when
man.
now that we're hanging up, I'm going to get that done and then get my butt home because my newborn needs me.
That's
So
right.
so does my wife.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Again, we're going to acknowledge our partners in this event. Again, we've got thanks to Jorgensen Digital Stage at the Jorgensen Center for the Performing Arts and the H. Fred Simmons African American Cultural Center. Check out their upcoming spring events at jorgensen.uconn.edu and aacc.uconn.edu. And if you've enjoyed this discussion, we're going to have more content every Friday for the rest of the semester. We've got different, we've got women in animation, we've got indigenous voices, we've got religion in film, we've got some really great, exciting content. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And that's some good advice from Ram as well. To get the stuff going. And we're going to kick it off with some really great, we're going to have a virtual red carpet. Maybe you'll come back for that. I don't know, bring that beautiful baby. And we're going to do some amazing fun stuff. Next event is on Monday night at 7 o'clock. We have Dr. Aaliyah Brown presenting Black Rhizomes, a digital public history practice. And check out dmd.uconn.edu/diverse to see that content. Thanks to our wizards, organizers behind the scenes, to Nikki and Stacey Webb and Michael Toomey, who's running all the tech, and the Jorgensen staff and our student marketing team, everyone who helped to produce this show. And most importantly, thank you to everyone out there in the virtual audience for joining us today. We had an incredible audience. Content will be out there. And I hope that all of you are leaving as inspired as we felt, the love and the inspiration and the comedy and the joy in this call tonight. So thank you. We're going to work it. We're going to continue to inspire our young people, our young filmmakers, and mentor them, and change this industry, doing much more innovative things like what you're doing, Ram. So thank you. Everybody stay safe, wear a mask, and have an incredible weekend.
And if you're in Texas, I know it's crazy, but stay inside, please. Chaos out there. People in I don't know where they're getting this stuff, but they're like riding stuff on snow. It's ridiculous. Like, I don't live there, but I have my cousins there. My closest cousin lives in Baytown, Texas. It's ridiculous. Like, you hear motors at midnight. What's going on? They've got a makeshift jet ski a makeshift snowmobile that they've created. You know what I'm saying? Stay inside.
No,
at least they're having fun, I guess, rather than if maybe they don't have any Wi-Fi from the lack of service. Who knows?
All right. Well,
excellent. Thank you. Bye, everybody.